Alrighty, so I'm taking a break from the budget deck profiles for just a little bit. I did like a week ago or so. I did a review of the cards that we had spoiled at the time, and I thought that went pretty well. But since then, the whole set has been both spoiled. It officially releases this Saturday. I don't want to go over every card. I think it's a little bit too much, especially because like you guys have seen my impressions on some cards. So if a card just doesn't matter, I'm really not going to talk about it too much. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, in Fire, first things first, this backup lineup is good. So the standard unit backups this cycle is essentially that people are calling them, oh, they're power crept invokers. They're 1 CP vanillas, but they do something in hand if you don't want to back up. The only thing I will say about this is that there is still an opportunity cost to not playing other backups. So these are 1 CPs, which is nice. But a lot of times it's not bad to play like a 3 CP Searcher, which is, if you have a backup like this is, it's a 1 CP card that furthers your game plan. And sure, if you don't need a backup, these aren't backups anymore. And they're multiplayable, which is always great. I love multiplayable backups. I just like, there's so many good backups in the game right now that when I'm deck building, I usually find myself just saying, like, I'll have 14 backups that I really am excited to play. And at that point, I don't need a standard unit backup because I don't need to be able to multiplay whatever the backup is. So I think these are good. They'll see play. I especially love the Earth one with Robel Akbar as a way of kind of recurring a draw every turn. And like being able to turn that like backup recursion from Robel into just immediate, card advantage and new information. So these cards are good. They'll see play. I look for more powerful cards in my backup lineup normally, or cards that have a higher ceiling than this, I think. Salamander, I think, is very good. Selfie, I think the fact that this is fire forward recursion is great. They haven't really had great access to that. EX Burst, I think she's going to be a one of staple in just about every fire list going forward. Two-headed dragon. So they kind of rotate. They'll do monster summon on heroes. Last set we got standard units, which, oh man, those standard units were not good. But the monster ones lately have just been straight bangers, and this cycle of hero monsters is nuts. Every single one of them I think is good. Two-headed dragon's one of the best. This thing is so easy to animate. Turns every single one of your forwards into rain at all times. It's so hard to remove this thing. I am so glad they printed Chilinka because this thing is just like, it's so powerful and so hard to deal with. And you can't kill this thing unless your opponent gives you an opportunity to. And even if they do, it's a 4 CP 9k. Ludicrously powerful card. This thing's going to go in every fire list as a 2 of. Mono fire. This Tidus is really solid. I don't know how much play he's going to see just given how strong the mono fire pool is at this point. But self-mill is a powerful effect, and with stuff like Selfie to recur those cards in mono fire now, it is strictly advantage to mill yourself unless you are going to deck out. So you could go Tidus, mill 5, and then if you played multiple copies of Selfie, every single card that you milled is potentially a card that Selfie can recur later on. Every single one of those summons is a summon that a Terra summon can hit into damage, can pull back. Self-mill, unless you need the cards and can search them out later, is a form of card advantage. It's not great card advantage. It's tricky. It's hard to use sometimes. It will cause you to lose some games, but it is advantage. This pain is not good. Okay, so Ferris, I might have been a little high on this in my set review. I still think this card is very good. I think she is going to be a bit strange to build around. I think you have to kind of find the right number of Warriors of Light for her, but not so many that you want to play the Earth, the Fire Water Ferris. I know Eureka mentioned that like there's a potential for like a Fire Wind Ferris where you run Ferris, Soul, Lunith, Arc, and Bartz as like a little mini Warriors of Light package that just turns Ferris into this nuking machine. This Meath I think is solid. I think the EX burst saves this card. Otherwise, this is just it's too hard to play this over the other Meath. Ramza. So this is a sad one for me. So for a long time, I've said that Knights were criminally underrated, and I think they were for a while. But I've seen a friend of mine try to make this deck work and these cards work, and like they're so powerful, and there's some that are just good, and then it's like, yeah, you can cheat them in now from the break zone for two turns later, and like Warp 2 actually, like this is the one card with Warp that I actually really think the Warping Ramza is almost better than hard casting him would be, because you get to like have this looming threat for so cheap, and it's like all of this is true, and like there's ways of giving your knights brave so that you can use the break effect on your opponent's turn as a form of interruption while still attacking with your knights. And it's just not quite there. The perpetual value on knights just misses. It's funny because I think this actually makes the old Garland Opus 6 Legend a better Garland to play than the 4CP Garland. Every time I've seen the 4CP Garland come down, he just dies and doesn't do anything. And like this is it. Flare is crazy, but it's so high investment that it's not worth going for and building around. And you could play this Garland instead, and you give all your knights Braves. Now you have four knights attacking, and then the ability to pop them and do a point of damage, which is I think very powerful. But so many knights are ETB centric, and you have to like do this weird tri-spec where you're adding ice knights to the list, because Laswell like is the knight boss monster. Like he's not just the ice boss at this point. He's also the knight boss. And I don't know where the extra like removal comes in. Agrius is a great card. I love playing Agrius. 7K just it's so metagame dependent. If you're playing against nothing but twins and Iridius, 7K is fantastic. And then you play it against Barrett, and Barrett doesn't die. And you play it against Soiree, and not a single Soiree member dies. And it's like it's 7K power reduction, but it never feels like enough. And what she's in, she's just this big 10K beat stick. I don't know what more they could have done. Every piece of text on this card is good. I think they just need better knights. They need an Agrius that just guarantees kills something if she sticks around or something. I don't know. Maybe someone will make this look better. Knights was the deck that got me into the game. I have a giant Beatrix card over on my right now. I love this deck. I wish it was better. It's just not there. Beatrix is a great engine card. I think there are so many archetypes that would kill for a Beatrix. If you put Beatrix in Sky Pirate, she'd be a 3 of, but Knights just isn't there yet. This rain is sad to me. This is just poorly designed. I don't like saying that like cards need haste to be good, because I really hate the haste creep on fire cards. Like every fire card now has to have haste and has to do ping on the turn it enters, and this one doesn't. And they like, oh, but it's a 3 CP, and it's like, yeah, and like it's a knight, but it has anti-knight synergy because it has to come down first, which means that if you want the Laswell Dull Freeze off of it, and like Laswell and Rain are apparently best friends, and it's like, so it has anti-synergy with his best friend, and it has anti-synergy with Beatrix. Like, I wouldn't mind if this affects that, like, if you don't control any forwards, comma, or if every forward you control is a knight. I think that would have been great. Moving along, this Weiss got a lot better with the backup. There's actually a really nice little wombo there where the backup does the discard, so it's really hard to amount this. And for that, I think you will see play. This Q Chaspel, I think, is better than it reads at first because it procs discard effects even if your opponent does the counterplay to Ice, which is get 4 backups and then play off your top deck every turn. Very cool card. I know people are like, oh, you play it turn 1, your opponent like doesn't get anything for it, and you get like a discard. It's like, technically, yeah, but also no. I don't think that's the main use for this. This is not new Thaumaturge. I think this is more like a really powerful control tool. Like, say you're playing an Ice Earth, and you're really looking for just, like, recursion and power cards, right? Every single one of your cards in Ice Earth is so impactful that being able to use them multiple times is just good. I think this is those, like, really slow controlling game states. If you can keep your opponent down to a no-card hand, that's when the Scooch Haspel is going to be really good. Moving along, we have Krista, which is just a good monster. I do think it's a little bit, like, just because Scholar existed last set, and Scholar does the random discard as a multi-playable. So you can play 4 copies of that Scholar now if you really want, like, 3 CP, discard a random card. The activation effect on this card is obviously very good, but without being multi-playable, I really just think you have to lean into Perpetual Discard at this point with the way the game is played. This Chime, I think, is actually slept on. People don't really think about how good First Strike is. I will say, like, your opponent can go to combat, but that means your opponent has to go to like, say that you put your opponent to a 0-card hand, which is what Ice should be doing if you're playing a discard-heavy strategy. In that situation, your opponent has to immediately go to combat if they want to keep both cards in hand. They can do nothing with the cards in their hand if they want to prevent this from going off. And getting an 8k, 9k, 10k First Strike basically says, that's very nice. I will not be taking damage this turn. I think there's a place for this card in, like, an Ice Earth list in, like, the same way that, like, Arcanist is a good card. And I don't think the 1 card or less in their hand is that big of an activation condition on this card to not be good enough to see play. Theodore. This card did exactly what I thought it does. Essentially, this tells your opponent you have 2 turns before I put you at the Ice Lock state. So, for those that aren't familiar, what the Ice Lock state is there's a point in the game where you play against an Ice deck that is discarding cards where you will never keep a card in hand, no matter what you do. You can keep both cards in pass, and your opponent can rip both cards out of your hand. So, generally what you want to do against Ice discard lists, in my experience, is try to maintain hand size, hand size, hand size, hand size, and then you pick a point and you say, okay, cards on the table, all in, I'm going to play off my top deck. And you junk your entire hand, and they can no longer get their effects off of your discards. This forces that time frame, because you cannot increase your hand size against Ice discard that is actively discarding you. That said, the only other thing about this card is how big the body is, and it's like, it's very big, it's powerful, haste and First Strike are great keywords. I don't like this card existing. I really wish they could have... there were so many directions they tried to take Ice for a while, and it feels like right around Opus 16 again, they just said, Ice is terrible, I'm tired of this, start printing discard effects again. And it's like... it's one of those things where discard is only as good as the critical mass of it. And it's the same thing with reactivation effects in Wind, where it's like, if you make your opponent discard 1 card, they'll say, sure, whatever. If they discard 5 cards, they start being, oh, I'm just not getting to play the game. I think it's really frustrating. I wish they would have gone... there's just... I feel like there has to be a better design space for Ice than discard my opponent's entire hand, play Physalis, win the game. But that, like, it feels like that's what Ice is right now, and I think that's especially restrictive when Physalis is a $30 legend. Anyway, this Physalis, I think, is one of the coolest cards in the game. I will say she hasn't looked amazing in a lot of the games I've played, but I don't think that's a knock on the card. I think a lot of it is just kind of the way Ice plays. There are going to be lists where this card is really good. I think Icewind especially will probably find a use for this card. Basically turning in 1 card for 2 in a list that's looking to cast as many cards as possible will just always be a solid effect. A good example of that would be like the Moro from Opus 16. That Moro basically does this. You party attack, discard 1, draw 2. So, and for that reason, she will see play. And she would see play just based on the name alone, too. going on Cerberus. This card is crazy. Biggest thing for me here is, you know, again, my main deck that I've played since Opus 12, Earth, Wind, Storm. Say hello to the new best thing you can do with the Mira. A lot of times I would play Mira, Revive, and Ochu for like a while, and it's like that turns Mira into basically extra copies of Ochu. This turns Mira into Yuna, or it turns Mira into Luso, depending on which one you need. Yeah. Steve D said it just activate all the backups you control. Sure, just throw that text on a 3 CP monster. The only thing about this card that I don't think is amazing is the activation effect. Sure, a 3 CP 9K is good, and it's not hard to cast 2 cards in a turn. It is hard to do it on your opponent's turn, and that means that this card does not function as a blocker, which I think is one of the things that makes Atomos so good. You don't ever want to block Atomos, which is why, like, if you could block this instead of Atomos, you always would. But Atomos as an emergency blocker has saved so many games for me in Earthwind, and this card being kind of unable to do that, I think makes it a little bit weaker in that respect, but still a crazy good card. This ZG I've actually had a lot of fun with in Turks, of all things. I also think he's very good for the Yuffie deck. Charlotta. I think this card will do something eventually. I think like playing this for 4 off of Atilica, this basically kind of becomes extra casts of Fiona on a forward. But it is also like 5 CP is expensive, so I'm glad they didn't put EX Burst on this card. I think that would have been too good. But yeah. This Bart's one of my favorite cards of the set so far. I don't know if he's amazing, but he's really fun. This is the best Turk, or the 4th best Turk. It is the 3rd best Dancer. It is all of those like archetypes they keep trying to print that just don't have a great, like, or missing like 1 or 2 extra names to have like a critical mass of good forwards with that job. Bart's will cover that for you. I could almost even see this slotting into something like Avalanche as just like another Avalanche operative that like is just really sticky and hard to deal with. Fantastic card. I love it. I love the art on it too. I can't wait to get a playset of this card in foil. Yuffie. So I know this is going to sound very, very preposterous. I was wrong on this card. And I was wrong for a strange reason. I maintain that if you play Yuffie as a 3-of package in a win deck, you could do anything else with that CP, and it would probably be better. I think she would be very good in ninjas, obviously. What I did not put together is that this is Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King. And so here's the list I've put together. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other card name Yuffies. If you can stick this Yuffie to the field, you have an untargetable 10k with the potential to give first strike off of a backup that also gives her 1000 power and turns half of the cards of your deck into a 2 CP board wipe on your opponent's turn. She is simultaneously the most powerful offensive payoff I think I've ever seen in the game and the most powerful defensive card of all time. I think that, like, and I get why, like, I don't actually blame the card designers for this one. I actually don't think Yuffie reads busted in any way. I know that, like, I have a friend that's been complaining. It's like, well, why is it until the end of your opponent's turn? Because the card is a 5 CP 9k with haste that just activates your forwards. If it doesn't have that text, the card would be just beyond unsalvageable, probably. This is the same situation to me as the Sophie Doga deck. I don't think there is a reason to playtest the idea that you could throw 18 card name Euphies into a deck and then Doom of the Living on an untargetable Bungus. Like, there's so few outs to this card because you're also playing it in Wind. And it gets worse because I've seen this, like, this is a mono Wind idea that I have, but you could do this in Earthwind, so you have summon cancel, so your opponent can't hit her with a summon. The only things I know that kill this are Susano, like, easily, are Susano with Adelard on field, so that's a 2 CP forward that you have to play down, and a 6 CP forward. You have to pay the kicker on Adelard, and you have to kill a backup for Susano. At that point, you can let the Yuffie die, get another one, and continue to go off. You can Shadow Lord it. Again, they're paying 7 to kill your Yuffie. And the thing about that is that if your opponent has to kill you that turn, because if you stick another Yuffie, they're right back where they were, but they're down 7 CP. Shantoto does it. Same problem with Shantoto. There's just so few ways to get rid of this card. And she's massive. Again, she becomes a 10k first strike if you can find the Godo. God forbid if they ever print a backup searcher for Godo so you can play this down. But who would ever think in playtesting, well, all these other Yuffies are terrible, but what if we just throw them all in the deck and then play Doom of the Living Control? She can almost always get in. I think that you could, if you wanted like a tech card, especially like for Mirror, so it doesn't become just Yuffie into Yuffie the whole time. The Opus 1 2CP Zidane cannot be chosen by summons or abilities and can't be blocked. This becomes essentially a burn card that your opponent can no longer deal with unless they have Cleave. You might say, well, what about like stuff like Squall? Squall plus Jin. That would be a 5k Cleave, 5k Cleave, or something like a Cyan. The moment your opponent goes to combat, you just go, cool, Yuffie, Doom of the Living, kill everything. I think Rydia potentially stands out as relatively easy counterplay to this, but like we're gonna have to tech some really weird ass summons if this deck actually takes off, and I don't think there's a reason it wouldn't. I think this card is that good by itself. I kind of like the idea of like a ninja deck that just plays a single ninja to the field and like that's it. Feels very like, like the meme like arbitrary power of ninjutsu, where it's like the more ninjas are are in a room, the weaker the ninja gets. I kind of like the idea of like a single ninja just becoming an unkillable boss, but wow. I think if you're in water, you might want to dust off those Atomoses just to have an out to this card. And even then, you really need to be like quick on killing. Earth. Armin is solid. Again, that whole monster cycle is good. Galif? I'm of two minds on Galif. So, on the one hand, everything about the card is okay. But it's just okay. And I think it shares a lot of similarities with the Opus 14 Garland, which the more I've seen Opus 14 Garland, the more that scares me about this card. I will say that Galif is in the right color for this effect. I think this gets a lot better when you pair it with things like Tilica and Noctis. And I think the cost of swinging rather than playing large numbers of card named Garland in your deck is a lot better, a lot lower. The opportunity cost to play this Galif is a lot lower than having to play 3, 4, 5 card named Garlands. And for that, I think he will see play. I just don't know that he's going to be a shining star in any particular deck that he is in. Pour one out for my girl. This is not a bad card. For the record, this Kryle's good. I just wanted something on par with the Opus 12 Legend, and this isn't that. I was listening to Eureka talk the other day, and he was saying that he thinks the Opus 12 Legend is actually an outdated card by this point. I actually don't agree. I think she's very good still. But that is also, I'm so used to playing her in Earthwind Storm, where she is one of the bigger enablers of that deck. Like, she's one of the reasons to be on Earthwind Storm, especially because she costs 1 off Fatilica, and like being able to like recur summons, steal summons is just so good. This is very good at Rydia. You can go pitch, pitch, Rydia, pitch, pitch, Porum, Sildra, Sildra grab, Kryl X. Next turn, play when he comes back to your turn, play Kryl. Kryl gets back Sildra, free cast Sildra. You've now gotten a backup. You've gotten two full Sildra searches to get 3 forwards of your choosing off. And a lot of times your Rydia uses on your turn, you can be a lot more proactive with them. It's kind of like the way Rydia turns tend to work is you kind of want like your turn you want to do proactive summons, and your opponent's turn you want to do reactive summons. So on your turn, do Sildra, your opponent's turn, Amat, Mist Dragon, Leviathan, Six, Remora, anything that kind of like interrupts your opponent and stops them from playing. The fact that she enables Sildra so much, I think, is going to be just a massive boon for the deck. Kate Sith's a cool card. I don't know how much play it's going to see. Damage 3 is just like, you really need that damage 3. If it was even a damage 1, I think it would be actually really fun. But damage 3 is just a little too high. I haven't seen enough of Daisy. Still love the card from a design standpoint. Skolka is the wrong name. Hashmal probably sees a little bit of play. I just don't know where. Polk is a literal custom card. If you had said, hey, Daniel, I'm making a new Avalanche card, and I want to just break Avalanche. There's a Yu-Gi-Oh series that someone does where they say, hey, here's our archetype. I'm going to give you 1 card, and you're going to take your archetype from being an average archetype to being the best deck in the game. What do you do? If you said, hey, Daniel, it's Opus 18. I want to make Avalanche the best deck. What is the custom card I print? It is this Polk. It is a 1 CP Avalanche Operative backup that is Earth. Like, I even thought that like Avalanche Operatives would play a copy of Neo because they've been so thirsty for an Earth Avalanche Operative backup. So the fact that Neo has no text doesn't matter. You would play a 3 CP vanilla. It's that much value in Avalanche Operatives to have a 3 CP Earth or an Earth backup job name Avalanche Operative, and they just shit out Polk. This card is ludicrous. It breaks itself. You can do things like break this, get it back with Barrett, play it again, recur Barrett if Barrett dies. Like, oh, I cannot believe this card was printed. This is the one type of card they could not have given Avalanche Operatives. This Riku is becoming the card that I'm quickly having the most fun experimenting with. There's a lot of like similarities with this and the Opus 16 Earth Terra, but there's a couple of big differences with this card. First off, Category 6 is much more restrictive than Earth backups. I've experimented with this Riku in Monks. I've been experimenting with her in Avalanche. I've been messing with her in just mono Earth good stuff. And in every single one of those, she has made those decks look better. Because all of those decks want to play multi-element forwards. The fact that she enables you to play off-color multi-element cards is fantastic. Multi-element cards are some of the strongest cards in the game, and they're intended to be restricted by the fact that they're hard to play. I think the fact they printed 2 back-attack multi-element cards is crazy for Riku. You can do stuff like play Riku, pass turn, your opponent's turn, they try to kill the Riku, you back-attack in a Sonin. Now Riku adds back on your opponent's turn as well, which I think gives her the value that cards like the 2CP Nicole don't give you. This card, I think, is really fun to build around. I think she's a fun inclusion in a lot of decks. I could see her slotting into so many decks. I think the most likely home for her is going to be Avalanche. I think Sonon is a card that Avalanche wants to actually play and just doesn't have a really super easy way of doing so, and I think she helps enable that while also recurring Barrett. So, like, there's kind of just the potential for Avalanche to not have to be this super aggressive all-in deck. You can actually potentially play this, like, long mid-range game where you just have the most powerful cards and permanent access to them no matter what your opponent does. And I think if that's the case, I think Riku is going to be a standout card in that deck. Moving on. August is interesting. I kind of wish he had like back attack or something so you could like do this on your opponent's turn. I'm not sure where this really slots in. Probably like the best thing I can think of would be trying to put this with like Arden or something so that you don't have to get the 3 and then you have like a double attacker, or like pseudo brave big bungus. I just like, it's weird. I think that Arden is going to take a while for people to figure out. I think the text on Arden is incredibly powerful and is only going to get better with time. I think the biggest restrictor to Arden is the colors he's in. And I think if that becomes a thing, this could very easily be a one of, especially given how much recursion lightning has as an element. I haven't seen much of this Aphmau, but I think she's a little slept on. A 3 CP search a 2 CP character, like reveal 5 for a 2 CP character is not that restrictive. A friend was actually looking to play her in Golbez. I don't think Golbez is the most competitive deck in the world, but being able to pick any 2 CP forward in Golbez and just cheat it in from the break zone is always good. I think cascading into those, getting a couple easy backups, I think she's going to see some play. It's going to take a lot for me to not just consider the forward Aphmau as one of the best lightning backup engines. I think the size of Aphmau as an engine where it's 3 forwards and 4 backups, and you're set for lightning CP for the entire game, allowing you to splash it as a very small package to get access to lightning CP is, I think, very underrated. But I don't think this card will see no play. I think this is a good enough card to see play somewhere. Garda. I hate to say it, this is the best unconditional board wipe in Lightning. You will never warp this card. I don't think this sees play just because I think it's too hard to make work. Maybe as like a one of that you could like recur with an Axis. But like, I almost feel like if you're paying 10 CP for this, you've kind of just lost the game no matter how big the board you break is. Like, even if your opponent doesn't like cancel it, and if your opponent cancels it, you can just pick up your cards and go play some Yu-Gi-Oh or something instead. I still almost think I would rather run 3 Alize and 3 Ishtola and try to make my board wipe just the Scions engine as a board wipe if I'm playing Lightning. It's a lot more cards. It's like trickier to put together, but like, that's how down bad I would be to not play this if I needed a board wipe. Is I would rather go play Alize at damage 3, grab back 2 Ishtola, play Ishtola, dull Alize, and then Ishtola Pulse of Origin. Like, that's how down bad I am for a board wipe in Lightning that actually functions. So maybe you are that down bad to play this one. This Gilgamesh, I know a lot of people think this card is disappointing right now, and it's not the best card in the game. I do think there is potential for this as a mini engine with Cypher. You could go 3 Cypher, 3 Gilgamesh, and you have a self-damage engine that both gets a hasty, 9k forward on the field, breaks a card, and then does like 3 points of damage to your opponent, and then like Cypher helps fuel the damage 3 on Gilgamesh. And like a lot of decks, like breaking a 2 CP forward for 4k and then doing 2 points of damage is probably like good enough. I think like in like really aggressive self-damage decks, I think it's stuff like Scions that are really looking for that, efficient way to put themselves on damage 3, put themselves on damage 5. This could see play. I think when we get the 5 element card next set, there's a potential that like you just search that card, pitch it, and then it's fodder for this Gilgamesh to be a 4 CP break anything double attacker. So I'm not gonna write this card off just yet. I know a lot of people are. Cindy is maybe the best way of damaging yourself a lot very quickly. I don't think there's a non-zero. I think there's a non-zero chance that there's like a super aggressive self-damage deck that like goes turn 1, play Cindy, swing in. Turn 2, Cindy, self-damage, attempt to hit an EX burst. Play a Cypher, play a Rain, play just any number of cards. Swing in. Turn 3, like you get the idea. Like then you go like, Cindy, get yourself to damage 3. All of a sudden now Gilgamesh hits twice. And Brave, and you have like a Cypher as well, and like all of a sudden you're doing 4 points of damage out of nowhere extremely quickly. Like maybe that's a little too pie in the sky, but I feel like doing yourself points of damage is actually, like, it's a benefit at this point, getting yourself to damage 3 easily. And this is, like, the easiest card to ever put yourself on high damage I've ever seen. The only thing that makes it a little tricky is your opponent has to play a forward for you to self-damage. But even then, maybe you're just okay swinging this little 4K engineer and doing damage if you're playing an aggressive deck that, like, is okay with using the dull to try to get the points of damage across. Interesting card. This Melusine, I think, is one of the craziest monsters. I know that, like, so there, I need to see the rulings on this card, because someone said that if you steal a forward because you didn't have control of it at the start of your main phase, you can't attack with it, which would make her brain control instead of change of heart, which brain control is a good card in Yu-Gi-Oh, but it is a lot weaker, admittedly. That doesn't track with me. I feel like you should instead be able to just, like, pull it and then attack with it if it was, or if it would have been able to attack that turn. I need to look up rulings on stuff like Chaos and things like that. Even if that isn't the case, she's a 2 CP untargetable 7K. So she's above curve. She blinks out when you don't want her to, and she removes the threat out of the way so you can swing in with your aggressive forwards. Slam dunk card, super powerful. She's going to see play somewhere eventually. This Ash, I was underrating this card. Shocker, I know. I'll go in here, I'll pull up. Oh, I did not mean to do that. Shoot. Sets, Opus, that's. Apologies. So I went back and I've been playing a lot of Folka this set in testing. Like, Mono Water they gave such crazy support to that, like, I'm like, this has to be worth playing somewhere. But, like, a lot of previous Mono Water builds that I would play all had the same issue, which was you would draw a lot of cards, do a lot of cool things, and then you would lose because there wasn't, like, actually water was such a strong supportive element that it didn't have the individual plays on its own. And the one deck that ever broke that paradigm was Folka, where you would play the 3 CP Folka Legend from Opus, I want to say Opus 10. And if you have this Folka plus this Tros and a Tidus on field, your opponent basically can't choose your forwards. They will never stick their forwards, and you're just going to, like, slowly whittle your opponent down until you just go for a big push and kill them. And that deck kind of just died. 2 main reasons. Number one was the banning of Moshiri. That deck would play 3 Moshiri. And the second reason was the printing of Soiree. Soiree was a very, very bad matchup for Folka because they were all ETBs that were cheaper than their printed cost. So they would just gladly take the card back to hand if you mounted it with Folka every turn and then replay it on you. So, but Soiree is kind of falling out a little bit. A lot of the players in my testing group don't play a lot of Soiree in testing. And I think this is the best Folka has felt since then. I still think that, like, this feels overly linear. It really only does the one thing. And if your deck has a game plan against the one thing, you probably just lose on Folka, which is why I don't think I'd ever take it to a big tournament. It's like this, like, slow control grind burn deck. Like, I call it burn. Like, to me, it's like Tidus is just wave motion cannon. But I don't see the modal operation in the deck being there in a way that makes me want to pilot the deck at a large tournament or large scale event. So, moving on. This Renoa, I will say, was better than I thought she was when I first read her. To me, any removal in water just has to compete with Glaciella. So let's say you're paying 3 for this Renoa, like, Warp 2, but, like, if you're trying to get removal on a forward, you should, like, just pay the extra 2. And then you pay up front, and it's like, if you pay 2, like, she can get expensive in a hurry, but, like, she can remove the big threat if you need to. But to me, Glaciella is just such an all-encompassing removal tool. And people, like, don't even realize, like, just, you know, I heard someone say, like, well, you could play this if you're not playing Glaciella, and I'm like, so you want me to pay 3, pay up front for the kill, and then have it get Amaterasu? Like, that seems really bad. I think Glaciella, even as just like by yourself, no other crystal generators. If your opponent wants the one card that you would kill with this Renoa to stay alive, they have to Amaterasu the crystal gain on the Glaciella, at which point you haven't paid anything extra, your opponent has traded even with you on cards, and you can just have your next removal spell land. So I think this is like copies like 4, 5, and 6 of Glaciella, and I don't know how many decks need that many copies of Glaciella, especially when I think Glaciella does very well like with 2 copies of Ramada in your deck as well. That said, she's been better than I gave her credit for, so I will say that like she's looked good in the games I've seen her come down. She just is competing with one of the most pushed legends of all time. This Lena, so I said I thought this card was good, and it's good. I just still am kind of on the fence on her in that I just don't like playing Leviathan. And I know that like that sounds crazy. Like this big 9 CP blowout card is actually like a problematic card to play, but it's like you're still giving your opponent 2 cards to kill 3 things normally when you play Leviathan. It's like you're killing 2 things and putting 2 things back in hand. And that effect is really good, and it's really good if it's off of a 3 CP forward that can't be Amaterasu'd for the actual play. I've seen this thing revive 3 Leviathans in a single game, which was absolutely disgusting. Leviathan does give you perpetual value on field. I just don't see the tools in Mono Water to protect the Leviathan once you do that. So it feels like a one and done, big push card. I will say this is one of the 2 best full arts in the game next to the Opus 15 Terra. Holy cow, this thing looks incredible. For the Light and Darks, Elena's actually decent. I do agree with Steve that like if your opponent's killing your 1 CP 5k, they're investing more into killing this than you spent getting her onto the field. I just don't think she's going to be worth the deck slot a lot of the time. I will say 3 CPs at Ain on command is very good. Especially if you have like a way of reactivating the Selena and just like continuously ripping 3 cards out of your opponent's hand for 3 cost each. Especially like on a card that can also attack. She becomes like a 1 CP 8k if she's allowed to actually like make it survive a turn. There's probably like you could play her and I think she would be fine. I just feel like there's so many other cards that you would go for first. Soul's been a more interesting card than I think people give him credit for. I think giving your forwards Brave is nice, and it gives them Brave at the right time. I think there is the potential for the last effect to become degenerate. I think of like something like the loop list where it's like you could play this in loop, and then your opponent can no longer interact with your board while you do your loop thing. I don't think Loop is going to go out of their way to play this unsearchable 3 CP Dark card to turn off summons. I think they're just going to attempt to play through Amaterasu's. Like, if your opponent's looping you, you kind of just have to like start firing your summons and interrupt the loop and hope your opponent can't loop through your interaction. This turns that off. I don't think they're going to do that. But that line of text still scares me for that reason. If Loop becomes like a much smaller engine, they can maybe consider that. This Ultimecia, I think, is a really interesting card. I think there's a lot of decks that can get away with casting 1 card a turn, casting 2 cards a turn. And very obviously, Mono Wind was the best deck in the format in Opus 17. And Mono Wind cannot do Mono Wind things if everything they cast costs 1 extra. It will not work. Speaking from experience in Earth Wind, the difference between activating a Tilica and not having Tilica, it's like exponential how much better your cards are when they cost 1 less. And I imagine it's the same effect when they go increased by 1. So I think in any deck that has a really bad mono win matchup, the first deck that comes to mind for me is Scions. I think Scions is priced into playing this card. I think you have to. I think you have to play something that once you get the Typhon out of your mono wind opponent, they now have to deal with this card before they can play the game properly. Moving on, Axstar, I actually underrated a little bit. I thought that, like, I always read this as, like, you're doing these in order, but I was like, oh, if plays a 3 cost fire character of cost 3, right? That happens after the Dull Freeze. You can play a 2 cost with Axstar, and you don't get a 6k ping unless you have other cards on the field. But that's not bad. Like, Dull Freeze all of your opponent's forwards, and play a 1, 2, or 3 CP fire or ice forward. And then also, like, this, like, perpetual value engine of, like, also when I enter the field and attack, I'm going to do, nuke something. This card won me the first pre-release I went to because of that, like, series of interactions, and I think he's going to see a lot of play just for that. Moving along, this Caius I think is a really fun card for Garland, or not Garland, for Golbez. Again, I don't think anybody cares that Golbez is a thing, but you can go Caius, Luso, Warrior of Light, Porum. You get 5 colors for your Luso. So now you can go, if you make it back to your turn, your opponent can't block your Caius Luso. You have... what's the way to explain this? So you go turn 1 Golbez. Turn 2, swing Golbez. During your opponent's turn, play Titan, break your own Golbez, or play Delete it in your main phase 2 to break your Golbez. Get those 4 forwards. To your next turn, go Luso for 2, Porum for 1, Warrior of Light for 1, Caius for 2, and your opponent's basically dead. And if it's not worth it to go for 2 points of damage, the neutral effect of discard a card on a 2 CP 9k is good. It's just this, like, discard your hand effect is the most degenerate line of text. Like, it's so bad. Earthwind, Bosch is really good. It's just a boring good card. Not much more to say than that. Why? This Sid Hayes could have been a legend. This basically is lock levels of broken. I am now playing for Ice Wind cards in my Earthwind Storm, and the reason is because this thing is stupid. There's so much text that could be on this card that isn't. If it's me and you say, hey, how do we redo this card? The first line cannot become 0. Second line, 5 or more cards would honestly not be unfair to ask for this effect. And even then, I still think this card is maybe broken out the wazoo. This card should not have been printed. Flat out. Should not have been printed. I think now Icewind, it's very possible for Icewind to, as early as turn 4, Dull Freeze 4 characters and make you discard and have 4 backups on field and have 2 cards in hand or something crazy like that. Like, that's not outside the realm of possibility. And notice I said characters. So you can make your opponent have no backups, so they have to play out of their hands. This continues to attack their backups without having to, like, jump through hoops with Chocobo or Althea. I have considered custom cards for this game that are less broken than Sid Hayes. Melvin, I think, is actually relatively tame in comparison. This is good. It's a 2CP 8k that also freezes 2 backups. I don't know why you would warp this. Hilariously, the place it's best to warp is probably Earthwind. If you have, like, Tilica Chocolate, you get a Chocolate counter and activate Tilica for free. But I don't even think you ever bother warping this. You just hard cast this as a card that activates 2 backups and freezes 2 of your opponent's backups. Like, I will say I'm a little happy to see Icewind potentially back over Monowind. Um, the thing about Monowind that never really stood out to me that I don't like is I think Monowind has no control elements to it, and that's like what do I mean by control elements? So if you look at my Earthwind list that I've been playing for Cure, let me go find it. So this is my Earthwind Storm list, right? There's a lot of Storm enablers in this list. I've got the 2 Azura, 2 Chocobo. I've got Rosa, Locke, Cryo, Lulu. All of these cards that are there to enable the Storm elements. Mira, Typhon. Let's go over the cards that had nothing to do with getting a high cast count. 1 copy of Prish, 1 copy of Prompto, or 2 copies of Prompto. One, I guess Ignis fills that. 3 copies of Noctis, 2 copies of Gladio, 2 copies of Titan, 2 like 20 cards in this list are there to say, do not kill me. Monowind didn't bother. Monowind would play 3 copies of Typhon and say, if that's not enough, I will lose the game if I don't draw into my stuff before I do it. I think that's really boring. It kind of feels like it's just solitaire based on what your opponent draws. I think Icewind at least has the potential to have a control element to it because you're attacking your opponent's backups. You're not playing solitaire until you resolve Luso 7 3 times in a turn and wipe your opponent's field while drawing 8 million cards and end with 4 cards in hand, 5 backups, and 16 forwards. But these cards are ludicrously pushed. For the Ice Lightning cards, I mentioned before I thought there was like the potential for like back attack Sephiroth on turn 1, then play Laswell on like your first turn, but like you can still swing the Sephiroth, force the discard. I think that's probably not the best way to play the card. Now that I've like done some testing, I like deliberately did that a couple times against a friend, and he's like, "Why do you keep doing that? Like like I really don't think it's like as good as you think it is." I'm like, no, I agree. Like, I think it's going to be matchup dependent, but like, if you know your opponent's on, say, Mono Win, your opponent's not going to have a dull forward for you to hit. Back attack in, get that early point of damage, start discarding, just do anything you can to disrupt your opponent's setup. I think it's nice that that mode exists on this card. And this card is so good with Riku. Oh my goodness, this card is good with Riku. This card's great. Super good. Love it. Well, I hate it. I hate that this card exists because I hate Ice Lightning. My win rate when Al Cid hits the field feels like it's 30%. But yeah, Sephiroth is crazy. And this Lightning is actually not bad either. A lot of this text doesn't feel like it's stuff that like you really need in Ice Lightning. Like Ice Lightning doesn't generally go for a discard plan a lot of the time. It doesn't struggle to dole things out of the way sometimes. Breaking a forward is like nice, and you could. I think there's a couple things people don't realize in this card. So you can go Ice Lightning a lot of times for me is best when it's played off of 2 backups. So you go Reeve, Kate Sith. Those are your 2 backups for a majority of the game. Go from there. What this Lightning lets you do is you go pitch, Lightning, swing, pitch, or if you have 3 backups, dole 1. Dole the forward. When that resolves, pay 2, break the forward you doled. So she kind of becomes this like 3 CP kill spell when she's on field. And like none of these effects are once per turn. If you have like 4 backups, you can break 2 things if they're dole. If you have Al Cid will dole something into Lightning breaking it. I think this card is really good. I hate being an Earthwind player. So, starting things off, Chilinka is good. I already played 3 CP Prish in every Earthwind list as just like the perfect tech card to handle monsters. I have never chosen the add 1 CP plus Brave in a game where it mattered. This is a straight upgrade. I think the other thing it does is it lets you play Prish. I think particularly the legend from last set is worth considering as just a bit of a control tool. So I think that that's like a really cool, additional thing you can have access to. But that's like the main use of this card is like you can play Prish now and like still have Prish's effect. I think this Tifa just outright sucks. I said it in like the earlier review. If you want me to play this Tifa, I'm gonna play Prish instead. There is no text on this Tifa that is better than Prish. And then we get to Fran. I hate this card. And it's not that like I hate it because it's bad. I think this is objectively ludicrous. But there's no category 12 characters I want to play in Earthwind. Like, so it doesn't. It's like a build around. So like, Ice Wind gets a literal like a pair of custom cards, and like my version of the deck, which I think is actually the healthiest version of a cast focused deck. This like, really hyper interact, like much more interactive cast focused deck. Just gets shit on for Tilica's sins, and you're just like, yes, Tilica should not be in the game. Ban Tilica and print wind cards and Earth Wind so you like push Storm players into playing a fairer game, like a more interactive game. Oh, I hate that this card exists because it's so good and there's just no way to play it in the deck. I think there's actually like some really positive Tricolor Sky Pirate stuff that you can do with this. Sky Pirates does the Exodia board thing, and this accelerates the Exodia board. And Earth Wind as an element combination is very good at saying, "Don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me." And Sky Pirates has just been dying for ways to say, "Don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me." Haha, Exodia! She facilitates that. She's good. She'll see play. She's only going to get better with time. I wish this card did anything else. Just ban Tilica so you can give us a real Earthwind legend that isn't just the most awkward card of the set to try to find a home for. Better news. Well, better. All three Earthwinds are crazy. This Vanille is insane. Sonon is actually insane. I think the biggest thing with Sonon, Avalanche, I think, should go out of its way to tech this if they're trying to play a more mid-range game. A lot of older Avalanche lists used to be on 5CP Titan as both a combat trick and a way to protect Barret, or like a way to like remove opponents like forwards. This is removal, kill spell, protection. If you have Riku, it becomes recursion for your Barret. You can color fix this with Billy Bob because Barret does things. It'll never color lock you because Barret does things. If you don't want to have Sonon in hand because you can't cast it because you're not ever going to play lightning cards that aren't named Sonon or Billy Bob or Tyro technically, you can do that. This card is actually really good, and I think people are underrating it a lot. It's boring, but it's good. Billy Bob, I will say, I was like, oh, thank goodness, Avalanche Operatives aren't going to go tricolor, so this is just like, Earthwind good stuff, or Earth Lightning good stuff. And then Eureka pointed out in Road Rose's set review that Billy Bob is recurable with Barret's, and you can discard Billy Bob to cast Billy Bob. So Avalanche Operative got another forward, and that forward gets back a copy of Barret. Slam Dunk, you have to play 3 is the only thing I think that's a little awkward about the card, because you have to try to get a Billy Bob into rotation to play your other Billy Bob. But a 3CP 8K vanilla that recurs Barrett on entry is practically a custom card. They didn't need more party effects. They just needed to be able to do their party effects more often. This card does that. So, slam dunk, home run, good card. I hate it. I hate that Avalanche remains good, but it's gonna see play, so get used to it. The water lightning cards, I just don't see. There's no water onion knights to tag into with this. So, like, yes, this does say, like, 4 CP, block anything, or kill anything you block, but, like, nobody's ever doing that. No one's paying 3 CP into elements to just bounce a forward. And, like, the onion knight targets to pull out of the deck just aren't good enough to justify the deck building cost of playing multiple onion knights in your list. That, like, the lightning ones aren't that good. The wind ones are, like, okay, but then you're playing a card that, like, doesn't do anything there. I just, like, to me, the worst thing about this card is I think it's going to restrict design space for onion knights, because they'll never be able to print like a 9 CP onion knight, because you're going to just use this and then kill this to shit out the crazy powerful onion knight. I don't like this card. I think this card is just poorly designed. It's in the wrong elements. And I love water lightning. I wish it got a better boost this set. This lightning is good. I haven't been super impressed with any water lightning builds so far. But I think it's only a matter of time before this card ends up being good. I think that, like, the more I've played it, the less I like the 6 CP lightning. I think you probably just play like 2 to 3 copies of this, 3 copies of Unicosplay lightning, and then you play Rydia as cheaper copies of the Knight of Etros 6 CP lightning legend. Lilith set. This thing's main purpose is going to be special fodder for the other Lilith sets. Firion and Arciela are... Arciela's a little worse than I expected, but I think she's still good. I think the one thing that also people kind of sleep on is she is a Megissa target that does threaten to be continued Megissa ping. That said, Megissa will struggle to ever hardcast this, but also now if they draw this, they can pull out a Axstar from the deck and then cheat this in from their hand, so actually it doesn't matter. You can still do this, no problem. So I think she will see play in that. She'll see play in Fire Water. And, yeah. The Retainer package, I think, is funny, because I'm not going to, like, claim to be a deck building genius or anything like that, but this has taken over the meta in Japan as, like, the best way to play Wind right now. A lot of people are... In Japan, they're playing this over, like, the traditional Miracle Wind as kind of the person who popularized it. Oh my god. Chris Patitsky, Miracle Wind, like, it's like, it does the thing that Miracle Wind has always wanted, which is a way of saying don't kill me, while, you know, you kind of put this, like, sleight of hand where you play this, like, this small engine of cards that, like, protect you, keep you from dying, control the board state, and then you combo off and win the game. I saw the potential for that independently of that, partly just because, like, I was going for Ignis. You don't even go for Ignis, which I think is funny. I think Ignis is not even the most important card in that combo. But yeah. Arden, I think, remains to be seen. This card only gets better over time. I think it'll get better if Fire and Lightning back attack cards get printed. And someday, to me, this feels like the Legend Terra, and that, like, if it's not good now, something will eventually find a way to play this card. I think the captains are still maybe too cute, but I really, really like Steve D's list. Go check that out. YYT, FFTCG. With that, that's probably about as big of a... I didn't mean for this to be an hour. I wanted this to be like a half hour. So you guys get an hour of Ghoul talking about cards very quickly and giving a bunch of really quick impressions from maybe 20 to 30 games of playing and watching. So, Thank you guys for watching. I know a lot of people have been like really enjoying the series where I'm like taking starter decks and trying to make them playable for like $20 to $30. I will probably do that with the Arden at some point, and then I'll probably do that with Soiree. So I think it'd be kind of fun to do for that. Maybe I'll do that as a separate video. I'll have like a behind the scenes of me deck building, so new players can maybe watch me do a deck build and like see how I do those builds. Because I think that'll help people get into the mindset that at least I like to get into while deck building, and maybe you can go from there and kind of build your own decks and have some fun. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see you guys next time.